Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here. Most people know me for my love of Final Fantasy, but one of my favorite franchises of all time is Armored Core. After renting Another Age back in the day, I have gone on to play most of the games in the franchise. And now, 10 years after Armored Core Verdict Day, we have Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. I wanted to give you a summary of my entire playthrough and my overall experience with it. Major spoilers in this video, seriously. I opened the game up to From's classic situation of dark, gritty, bleak, and hopeless. Come on, you know the drill. A desolate world being ravaged for its expensive and incredibly flammable resource coral. As a nameless augmented human merc with a basic frame with basic functions, I was looking for a fake ID. I had to blend in. This was the quintessential Armored Core experience, and it was what I was all about. It's what I've craved for years, and it was time to blast through this tutorial stage live on stream and show everyone watching that my younger years of piloting cores had taught me well. Until better than it's going now. Jesus Christ. Handler Walter, he's my handler. Oh yeah, a tutorial boss. To be honest, bosses in Armored Core aren't really a major point. They're there, don't get me wrong, but they're rarely so Souls-like, I suppose. There's massive MTs, walking fortresses, battles against other cores, but this immediately distinguished the game as a more modern Armored Core. I could see where the influence of the Souls series was going to be felt most. Took a few tries, but this copter was scrap soon enough. I was kind of glad it took a few attempts to get the tutorial boss down because there was one feature of Armored Core 6 I didn't really know how to feel about right away: the repair kit. Yeah, you can restore a bit of your AP or health 3 times a mission, and I'm used to the old games where your starting health is really the most major resource you have to manage throughout the mission, especially for the long ones. I was afraid the repair kit would minimalize some of that, but it really didn't. I found that throughout this and the rest of the game that it was a resource I was glad to have and something I still had to micromanage across some of the longer and more difficult boss fights and missions. After a few brief cutscenes, I was into the garage, the hailed kingdom of Armored Core. The amount of time I've spent in the garage far eclipsed time spent in missions way back when, but this game definitely seemed to shorten that time to get players into the action more frequently, at least while you were doing the story. I decided not to make too many changes and just started hopping into mission after mission. I explored, looking around for hidden parts to no avail, and made a few light purchases, but Chapter 1 was mostly going smoothly. The characters were really interesting, and I once again got to enjoy the mix of world-building mission briefings, short story expositions between missions, and lots of character building and mysteries in the missions themselves. Seriously, while most of the time you're getting story while you're playing, there's just a whole lot to digest here, and it definitely got the brain going pretty much the entire time. A few more tough encounters, but honestly, the copter still scared me more. Finally, a mission warns me about concluding the chapter. So I dive in, take out some standard mechs, and even another core that jumped me. I go to destroy the objective when a voice enters my head. Air, a mysterious Rubiconian. Not moments later, I am onset by this monstrosity of a machine, to which I whimpered and died repeatedly. Yeah. Oh my god! Hell of a Chapter 1 boss. I had come ill prepared for this encounter against the Beltius. My weapon options were lacking, and I went the stubborn route of not leaving the mission to buy new parts. Nope, I simply get-gooded myself. Fortunately, I was given a linear rifle, which ended up being essential given that it was one of the few things in my arsenal that could reliably break the shield. On top of just learning the boss patterns, it just took, I don't know, a few dozen attempts. But after that, the Chapter 1 boss joined the copter in the scrap heap. From this point on, things kind of leveled out a bit again. Chapter 2, I started making more significant changes to my core and noticed a few parts that were considerably stronger than the rest. Knowing my experience with similar parts in other Armored Core games, I tried to refrain from using them for a time. Honestly, I was just excited for the quadrupedal legs more than anything. The hover function was super handy for gaining an elevation advantage or just exploring maps. It's quite fun being a floating mini fortress of Hellfire to boot. Looking back through my playthrough, one of the only struggles I had in Chapter 2 ended up being one of the Rank E arena opponents. Not only was this one of the toughest challenges of Chapter 2 for me, for some reason or another, I can probably figure out why, but it was also one of the toughest arena opponents for me the entire game. Granted, when you see what I'm doing later in this video, you may be able to tell what the difference was between now and then. That was fine and all, until the Chapter 2 end boss. Guess Omega's freak cousin decided to drop in. This took me a bit to get down, but overall, I was far less frustrated with this fight than I was with the Beltius in Chapter 1. Going into Chapter 3, I gave in to the dark side. I'm sorry, I have to admit it. Normally, when I play Armored Core games, I build a tank mech for beating the story. A tank mech with tons of heavy weaponry is always a reliable option. It costs you a ton in ammo, and in older Armored Core games, you could very easily go into the negative on repeated missions if you were maybe a little too trigger happy with a setup like that. But that being said, you could still usually get through the story in one piece, so I was trying to refrain from doing it for a bit, but the double songbird, it proved too tantalizing for me. This helped roll through most of Chapter 3, though I definitely slipped and died in a few missions. There were also tons of juicy mysteries that just left me wanting more. Another thing that occurred to me was finding my first hidden part. Not gonna lie, up to now, I was looking for hidden parts, and I hadn't found one, and I was starting to think maybe From had lost their edge for hiding parts on the maps like all the old games. But nope. Found one right in the open in the tunnel sabotage mission. Now, every mission I had to fight my desire to look for parts, and it was brutal. Or I also had to fight the desire to go back to my old missions and look for parts, which I very much failed in stopping that. At least in Armored Core 6, they're in these containers with giant glowing beacons to help spot them from a distance. Seriously, I almost never found one using my radar. I could almost always spot it with my eyes, but my blindness still made me miss a bunch on some of the bigger maps. The Chapter 3 end boss, Iceworm, was fine, but much more about spectacle than mechanical difficulty like the previous chapter bosses. You gotta have one of those in there. You know, FromSoft always has that boss that's super large and super scary, but kind of like a big baby when you get down to it. Yeah, that was definitely the case for the Iceworm. But the character interactions were definitely the highlight. Tons and tons of dialogue happening, and great interactions you haven't gotten to see up to that point into the game. But with the Iceworm dead, I was on to Chapter 4. This chapter, things got serious. There were lots of scary moments across tons of different missions, even for my handy-dandy double songbirds. I contemplated making more changes, but no, my course was set. Just altering the left and right-hand weapon at times was all I was really committing to, and upgrading whatever parts I could that made sense. Boosters, FCS, the actual legs when I got a new quadrupedal model, things like that. Thankfully, for every scary moment was an equally awesome moment. The bosses here were next level, though ironically, most still made me think about how tough that Beltius fight was in Chapter 1. I even found the iconic Moonlight Blade in the final level of this chapter. Yeah, a lot of people think that's from the Soul series, but it actually goes all the way back to Kingsfield if I'm not mistaken, and Armored Core, I believe, had it before the Soul series ever came out. So yeah, it's just a FromSoft thing, so I just look for it in every game they release now. To be fair, here it was surrounded by bone wheel machines, but still was worth it. I also got the S-rank arena encounters and subsequently obliterated them. Seriously, is there anything these double songbirds can't destroy? Well... Oh look, see, he literally is. Yeah, the end fight for Chapter 4 proved to be my new toughest fight. Here we had Cruise Chaser 2.0 happening, swords here, lasers there, and a difficult to hit craft at that. My best bet was its opening attack, and every time it repeated it throughout the fight, and just trying to stay safe in the rest of the fight. Now, if I wanted to keep my songbirds, that just seemed like the only option I had. There were very few other opportunities to use them that felt really safe, though I'm sure I could have found them. Even when I finally KO'd this beast of a machine... Maybe it's just like a last... Oh, no, that thing has a full health bar again, huh? Oh, alright. Yeah, no, destroyed. I got it. I figured that part out. Yeah, he has a second phase. Honestly, it wasn't that much different, but it took a bit of learning to get through. Fortunately, his 50% super attack has a huge punish window at the end of it, so between that and waiting for the right openings, I managed to squeeze through in just about half an hour of attempts. Chapter 5 continued down the trend of hard encounters, and I decided to try and make them a bit harder at first. On top of the first mission putting you in a weaker mech for story reasons, the parts I got in Chapter 4 meant I could make a cool-looking, lighter-weight mech and outfit it with the Moonlight. It would have a laser sword, and it would be able to zip around and navigate fights, and it was going to be able to do all the cool things that all the other mechs were doing throughout most of the game. Yeah, it was fun messing around with, but anytime the going got tough, the Songbirds got going. The big thing here was a critical turning point in the story. Choose to side with my Rubiconian ally Air, who's been literally living rent-free inside my head the entire game, and save the coral. Or basically blow up the entire planet and render it inhospitable. Yeah, I went with the not genocidal option. Think that's what most people would do, reasonably, I think. Rubicon locals and Air were glad. The remaining corporations and factions were not. So I slaughtered all of them. There were some tough fights, but none tougher than this one. Oh my god. As if I wanted this rematch. Oh my word. Yep. Beltius is back. Better than ever, like the Hess truck. Honestly, I'd already tested a certain gun on the first Beltius fight and knew what this one's weakness would be. The bubble gun, as I called it. However, I may have sold it after I stopped using it earlier, so I had to look for new options. I didn't want to back out of the mission. I was being stubborn again. It is a fairly long one, but it wouldn't have taken that long to get back. Fortunately, I finished the mission without backing out to the shop, but not before hearing Snail ramble on about every single time how much I ignored Arquebus, how much he is Arquebus. My secret ended up being the super powerful pile pitch melee weapon, which tanked his health every time I landed it. I still had to avoid his deadly laser swords and frequent pulse blasts, but I managed in the end. That wasn't the final boss, though. I had to fight a few more things after that. But the final boss was none other than a seemingly corrupted Handler Walter, the NPC who had been taking care of me throughout the early parts and bringing me all of my missions and had mysteriously disappeared going into Chapter 5. Now, he had a coral-kitted AC, and it had firepower I was not prepared for. This fight took me a handful of tries, but with Walter's defeat, I had beaten Armored Core 6. Coral and Rubicon were free to live their lives, and I was a hero. But not for long.
Raven.
Yes, Air?
You took on my hopes. My selfish dream. Now, I want to see the future that you choose.
Yeah, even Air wants me to play the game again, not as if I needed any encouragement for that. You see, Armored Core 6 allows you to immediately replay the story, tossing you right back after the tutorial mission. You still have everything, and you can even replay the missions from playthrough 1. It's more like Nier's, second and third routes, etc., where you're really just continuing the game and not really starting it over. However, some new things happen here or there, some new missions, new dialogue, and new events in existing missions that seem suspiciously different from the first time through. You learn a lot more about what is happening, and a new plot entirely begins to unfold. So I speed blasted my way through New Game Plus. Most of the new missions fell as easily as the prior ones, and I made the opposite decisions I had been making the entire game. I wanted to do every mission, not just because there was an achievement, but because I wanted to see every possible plotline that could unfold. There were even alternate versions of previous missions, where I could choose to completely change my objective and take new sides mid-mission. I got to exercise some shenanigans on some of the bosses I struggled with the first time. Surprisingly, I managed to beat Ibis in a single try, but Beltius still took 2. That one was my fault, though. Most notable was the All Mind's interest in gathering more combat data, unlocking new test machines in the arena for me to battle against. This let me get all my upgrade chips and max out all of my mech's potential, but it's suspicious to say the least. You never want to hear an AI thanking you for your cooperation, ever.
The day will come when All Mind's evolution truly takes form.
Stop helping the machines! We also start having strange new occurrences around Balaam's pilot, G5 Iguazu. We keep getting pit against each other, with interlopers even joining in. It's also missing from some other parts of the game this time around. Strange. The biggest concern I thought I would have was a nasty 3v1 AC fight. Yeah, 3 versus me, and it's exactly as it sounds. There's no relief, there's no backup, there's no anything. You just have to win. But I somehow one-shot it. 2 of the best arena fighters and a rematch against an AC from the first playthrough with serious story implications. But songbirds will be songbirds. No, the actual hardest mission was undoubtedly the final one going down this new route, and I think this was the hardest mission in the entire game, at least for me. You see, last time I chose to save Air's people, but this time I agreed to destroy them. She, didn't take too kindly to that.
Raven, I will stop you.
That's a cool looking core.
Rubicon.
Ow.
I will stop this armor.
That's a hell of a robot. I was waiting for her to say, I am Melania, Blade of Mikola. Yeah, this path's final boss was Air herself, who I was honestly prepared to hear her say, I am Air, Blade of Mikola, halfway through, because that's exactly what this fight reminded me of. Fortunately, this time, I backed out to the shop, got myself that bubble gun to help with her shield in phase 1, and a chain gun just to chip away at her, and I went to town. Still took a few tries, and it was a tight fight. In fact, I think it took me almost an hour and a half to actually get through it, but in the end...
I'll end this, Raven.
Oh, that was close. I was like, no, 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 no. Oh yeah, I got her. Of course I did. With that, 2 playthroughs were done. I love these New Game Plus missions. New Game Plus missions. And this other path's final boss, but my job still wasn't done. Clearly, some suspicious activities were still going on, and even Walter wanted me to explore one more time. So that's what I did. I went through a 3rd time. Now, New Game Plus Plus had some insanely tough new missions, if I didn't bring double songbirds, that is. I actually only took about 5 hours for the entirety of New Game Plus Plus, having learned tons of lessons from my other playthroughs, and with all my new parts, I was just way better prepared. The new missions and events were still a lot of fun and very surprising, but of course, as I expected, the All Mind got more and more in my business during this 3rd playthrough. It was changing objectives, offering brand new missions, and in the end, recruited me to its true cause, to release the coral across the universe and achieve humanity's true potential. Seriously, who didn't see the All Mind being some sort of villain or some sort of power in all of this? Walter's corrupted AC was called the HAL, for goodness sake. That's not a Space Odyssey reference, I don't know what is. This led to some truly cinematic missions full of eerie dialogue from the self-aware AI. It directed me similarly to Air's mission, so I was doing whatever I could to stop the cores from successfully blowing up the coral. However, when all was finished, All Mind wanted to assimilate me into their being to trigger the event that would release the coral. Unfortunately, they integrated someone else before me. And now All Mind wishes to finish me.
Well, well. I've been waiting for this freelancer.
Are you fucking kidding me? I'm mad.
I can crush you.
Guazo. I mean, I'm not that surprised. He's been acting strange.
You will die.
Iguazu's been a strange one the entire time. Freaking Iguazu. Now, this wasn't that much of a surprise at this point. I mean, in a mission not too long prior, the All Mind deliberately sent Iguazu to gank me while I was dealing with another AC, so it made sense that he would continue to be involved. But still, freaking Iguazu? Come on now. This encounter ended up being 3 phases. The first was just a new Iguazu core with some helper bots. I blasted through that, but then phase 2 let me know what I should have been expecting. Not only did Iguazu bring along 2 of the floating pinecone sea bots from the end of Chapter 2, but Air actually joined me in her own AC that I had fought in the arena not too long prior. However, for the last 50%, it was mano-y-mano, and Iguazu went 1-0 in the first bout. It didn't last long, however, because the very next attempt, my songbirds reminded him that they were songbirds, and bam! The true final ending of Armored Core 6. This true final boss was a little easier than I expected, especially after what I went through with Air. No infinitely respawning shields or anything nasty like that. So zerging him down was simple enough. But I love the spectacle of it the entire time. The music was fantastic, and the story finale was just a beautiful thing to witness. Overall, Armored Core 6 definitely poked me in all the right ways. It had all the things that I had grown to love about the Armored Core series, but you could definitely see how it was modernized after years and years of laying dormant. The bosses for me were a welcome change, although I know that some people aren't a big fan of them bossifying everything about their franchises. What can I say? From does really good bosses, even if I thought the visual clarity on these bosses was a little bit tougher with all the lasers and explosions in my face. Not to mention the zippiness of them just going behind me at times and having difficulty keeping up with them. But, that's a skill issue, at least I'll say. And there were still things I didn't even really get to finish or attempt before making this video. I still need to get a ton of S ranks across all of the missions, I need to find all of the hidden parts, and I would like to mess around inside of PvP. It looks like it's a lot of fun, and given the last time I really PvP'd was Armored Core 4, I'd be looking forward to getting into a lot of that, if Sea of Stars hadn't released the day after I managed to beat this game. I'll have to revisit this at another time, and I'm hoping to see From continue to support the Armored Core franchise again. I think they can do it, and I don't think there's any reason why this game wouldn't do well. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but the Soul series wasn't either. But it's a series I've loved, and with Armored Core coming back, I'm feeling reinvigorated about From. Not that I was ever uninvigorated, but it's nice to have something that isn't just another Souls game. You know what I mean? So I'm excited. I hope to see more from Armored Core in the not so distant future. And I hope that all of you, enjoyed the game if you played it. And if you're just looking at it, then I would recommend it. At least if you like customizing giant mechs and fighting off giant enemies and sounds and robots. Anyway, that's a wrap for my summary of my playthrough with Armored Core 6 and my experience with it. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.